Ready to start.
Blog Talk Radio.
The cycle of tyranny, from liberty to complacency, from complacency to dependency, from dependency to tyranny, from tyranny to revolution, from revolution back to liberty.
Good evening, folks, or morning, or whatever time of day it is when you're listening to this. Welcome to the July 24th, 2012 episode of Lori's Talk News Radio. Okay, so for the last couple of weeks, kind of been having little history lessons, starting out with the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and how we went bankrupt, and that the bankruptcies are redone every 70 years, and then with the Civil War and how we lost the Republic at that point because Congress adjourned, then I die. There's that name again, that without day. The only other real thing I want to point out about this particular point in time is 10 years later after the Civil War, is 1871, where we had what's known as the Organic Act of 1871. And if you look that up, that's when the United States actually incorporated and became a corporation. And that ties into the Downs v. Bidwell that I had mentioned in a previous show, and how we ended up basically with two governments, according to the Supreme Court and others at that time. So I don't know if there's any questions. I've got another call in the queue here, and I think I might know who this is. 762. Is that you, Odie?
No, Jackie.
Oh, Jackie, you made it. Oh, hey, how are you doing?
Oh, well.
Yeah? Well, I've got you and Teresa on the line and myself. I think you got a chance to go back and listen to the other episodes, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we just finished up with a little bit of a recap and then got into the Organic Act of 1871, where we, of course, lost a republic and now have two forms of government. And as history is kind of an important thing to understand what has followed. So the next two things that I'd like to look at, if there aren't any questions up to this point. Teresa, did you have any questions up to this point on recap?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, the next two things, we're going to get a little closer to modern times. Two other acts. One of them is the Trading with the Enemies Act of 1917, and then the War and Emergency Powers Act of 1933. Now, in 1917, of course, we had World War I going on, coming up to an end, and we had people trading with the enemies, hence the name Trading with the Enemies Act. And so if you look up that act and the verbiage in it, it's very clear that it's people doing trading with the enemies, but it specifies outside the U.S. But if you come to 1933, the War and Emergency Powers Act, which you usually just hear it called the Emergency Powers Act, you'll find that they changed the verbiage of the 1917 Act, and it says any person within the United States. And it's interesting because on top of it specifying people within the United States, which of course is us, it also makes reference to any natural person. Now, those of you that are kind of up to speed on this, you understand that we are all have been made corporations through the birth certificate process and all this type of thing. So when they say a natural person, that's kind of a big deal because that means flesh and blood now. We're not talking about just a corporate illegal fiction. We're talking about flesh and blood. But nonetheless, so in 1933 under Roosevelt, anybody trading gold within, basically what happened is that we the people were deemed to be enemies of the state. If we were trading in these gold and silver, and that's why there was the recall of gold and all this type of thing under Roosevelt. So, now that's kind of a big thing to become an enemy of the state simply because you're dealing with gold and silver. And if you look at the history that follows after that, of course, we ended up years later yet going off the gold standard, and some of us that are old enough to remember, you can remember that we used to have actual gold and silver certificates that you could trade in, go into a bank and demand your gold and silver, and of course those have gone by the wayside. Now, another thing that happened at this time, right around this time, is HJR 192. Now, that stands for House Joint Resolution 192. And that also came in because now that they had collateralized us, in law, there's a, I'm not sure what to call it. If they make a law, they have to make a remedy available. And since basically they had removed our ability to actually pay debt and actually only discharge debt, that's what they did with this HJR 192. And that's very interesting if somebody wants to take the time to look into that particular document, because it gets into the difference of discharging debt versus actually paying it off and how that can be done. It's a very interesting study, but it takes a lot longer than just a couple of half-hour shows to get into that. So, Trace, did you or Jackie, either one, have any questions up to this point?
What did you say the name of that was again?
HJR 192. If you pull that up, right? Yeah, if you pull that document up in a search engine, it'll come up. And Jackie, I know you've read quite a bit of this or studied it, so you know how long some of these documents can be and the legalese that they're in. But if you get in there, it starts talking about remedies and discharge of debt and that type of thing. Now, one little side note that I want to add on this before we get away from this Trading with the Enemies Act and the War Powers Act is very interesting. There was actually a commission, and I was trying to think of what the name of that commission was, and I'll be darned if I can even remember it. But Norman Dodd was the one that was actually charged with being in charge of the research, and he has, there's an interview that was done by him with G. Edward Griffin, I believe it was. It was either him or Dr. Stanley Monteith, but I believe it was G. Edward Griffin. And they did an investigation of the tax-exempt foundations, the Carnegie Endowment in particular, and he was actually allowed, he didn't personally do it, he had his secretary, his helper do it, went and actually read the minutes of the Carnegie Endowment Foundation and found some very, very interesting things. I would suggest very strongly that if you're interested, go back and find that. It's still available online as far as I know. If not, I have a copy of it. And they get into in these minutes how they were talking about how you change a country. And if there was, the first question they ask is if was there anything better than a war to change the attitudes of the country. And they, after about a year, I think it was, they decided, no, there's not. So the next question was, well, gee, how do we get us into a war? And this is actually what led us into World War I. That was brought up. And Wilson was actually, there's a letter, you probably have a hard time finding it, where the Carnegie Foundation actually requested that the war not end when it could have, because it hadn't accomplished the result. So that was just kind of a little side note there. Teresa, have you been following along okay on that, or do you need some clarification?
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more? I got the idea that we went into war, but I didn't know exactly what the deal was on that.
Well, when I say there was this Carnegie Foundation, I mean, it gets in the Archduke of Ferdinand. That was the official story and all that. But even if you look into that, that was another false flag operation. I'm the only reason I brought that up with Carnegie Endowment Foundation was to show that even before we got in there, these tax-exempt foundations were already looking at how to get us into war. So it wasn't. I'm not saying that was not the official story, but if you look up this interview that was done with Norman Dodd, he gets into the whole thing of the minutes of these foundations and what they were discussing. But that's not the official story. So like I say, that was kind of just a little side note. I just thought before I go on any further, just so you guys know, there's Teresa's on the line. That's my sister. She's in California. And Jackie's on the line. And I think you're in Georgia or something, aren't you, Jackie?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Just thought I'd introduce. The what?
I'm sorry, I was eating. Yeah, I'm in Georgia.
Oh, okay. Anyway, Jackie, I ended up meeting through another talk radio, Explore Insomniacs and all this. Vernon, he's a pretty neat guy, and that's how I ended up meeting Jackie. And interestingly enough, Jackie's pretty much up to speed on a lot of this stuff. And so it's kind of interesting because, and Jackie, for you on the opposite end, my sister's heard of some of these things from me, but she's not really so much up to speed. So it's kind of interesting. I'm almost got the full spectrum here of trying to, go over some of these things. So that's why I keep asking Teresa if she's got any questions as it goes on. So did
no,
that?
That's good.
Go ahead, Jackie.
I'm sorry, I said that's good. Other people might be wondering the same thing she is.
Well, that is true, because I can sit here and think that I'm doing a good job explaining this, but if there's nobody to ask questions, then, I don't know if I am or not. And so it really is kind of nice in that respect. So, but, okay, so those were the three things mainly that I wanted to go over with this Trading with the Enemies Act, War Powers Act, and this HJR 192, all of which focus on. The other thing I'm going to throw out is these Trading with the Enemies Act and the War Powers Act is interesting because those specify in times of war. Well, those of you that are pretty up on history, you'll know we've actually been in a perpetual state of war. We have the war on drugs. We have the war on terror. I mean, we've had, right after World War II even, gee whiz, we went, right away to Korea, and we had Vietnam, and we've effectively been in a perpetual state of war the whole time. And so these are always in effect, too. So keep that in mind when you go look these up. There's one little sidebar that I wanted to make today because of what's going on with this shooting down in Colorado and that type of thing. Awful coincidental. It seems to happen quite frequently that these types of things happen right when they're trying to pass legislation. And one of the things that I keep hearing and hearing and hearing is that any treaties made shall become the supreme law of the land. And that actually does appear in the Constitution. It really does. And I'm going to take just a minute here, and I'm going to read this. This is in Article 6. I guess I'll just read the whole paragraph, because they always end right there. So become the supreme law of the land, like it's period there, and it's not period. Let's see. The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, semicolon. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereto, thereby, semicolon, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Now there's your period. So it can't be against the Constitution, and it can't be against the state laws. So, yeah, it does become the supreme law of the land as long as it's not repugnant to the Constitution or the laws of the states. And I just wanted to get that out because I really didn't want to get in this whole... Say again?
What was that you just read?
That's out of the Constitution, and it's Article 6, starting in the second paragraph. Actually, it's the entirety of the second. Yeah, the second paragraph is what I read. But they always stop there. They just say supreme law of the land like that's the end of the sentence, and it's not, and it just drives me bonkers when they do that type of thing. You know, and obviously to enter into a treaty, a small arms treaty that infringes upon the Second Amendment would be contrary to the Constitution. So it's null and void prima facie, right on its face. So like I said, I didn't bring that up because I wanted to get in the whole Colorado thing.
I don't see that.
Huh?
Oh, I got it.
Oh, you found it? Oh, good. You've got a pocket. I should have known, Jackie, that you had a Constitution right there at hand. Good for you. And I know Teresa has one because I sent her one. But we've already talked about, yeah. But I didn't bring this up.
Or which shall be under authority. Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, I didn't bring this up because I wanted to get in this whole Colorado thing. Lord knows that's it's all in the news. But the bottom line is it's right before they're looking at voting on if they want this treaty. And as I'm pretty sure Jackie knows, I don't know if Teresa does, but some of the callers or listeners may not know, that the treaties are actually ratified by the Senate. And the last I knew, they were two senators shy of having the amount that they would need to ratify this treaty. And voila, here now all of a sudden we've got this, this terroristic shoot 'em up bang bang thing going on. And it just seems awfully coincidental to me, and I don't really believe in coincidences too much. So that's why I wanted to bring that little side note up. So are there any questions or comments on that?
Not from me. This is very interesting.
Okay. Yeah, well, and again, since I've got 12 minutes and I kind of covered those other couple documents, I'm just going to hit on this. I mean, when you look at this whole thing, these false flags that come up, we had the same thing. I mean, if you look at the Oklahoma City bombing, they were all trying to get on with the militias and this and that and this and that. They had the assault weapons ban that they wanted to do and all this. And then magically we happen to have these things. And I'm not, again, it's outside the time range that I have here with a little half-hour show, but you can very easily look into the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, there is so much evidence out there that was false flag. They tortured and killed that policeman, Terrence Yankee. There's a wonderful film out on it. I don't mean to plug, but I'll do it. It was called A Noble Lie. And these guys went through and they interviewed people there that saw the ATF and these people come in. I mean, there's just so much stuff that does not meet the eye. Are you familiar with that, Jackie?
It sounds familiar, but I can't say I am.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's just, like I said, it's just very, very coincidental when we have these types of things. And that's one of the things when you have false flag operations or something you suspect is false flag, telltale sign. Look at what legislation follows immediately after. I mean, I know it's hard for people to wrap their minds around that governments would do this, but all you have to do is go back and look in history. It happens repeatedly. And even this government, this de facto government of the United States. They've been caught. I mean, the Gulf of Tonkin. We already know. We have the recordings from the LBJ library and McNamara talking. You know, the USS Cole. We have that where they wanted that to the ground. I mean, there's even, you know, things back on Pearl Harbor. So it's not an unknown thing. I mean, when you get into what Operation Northwoods, where the chief of staff, L.L. Lemonster, wanted to fly a drone. Actually, interesting enough, believe it or not, we had drones back then to fly over Cuba and detonate it so that they could have a war with Fidel Castro. So it's not unheard of, these false flag operations. They're actually pretty common, including in the United States. So I don't know why people be surprised that we have them, you know, now.
Lori?
Yes.
Would you go over a little bit what the false flag operations are?
You mean what a false flag operation means, or some of the examples?
Both.
Oh, okay. Well, a false flag it's just like its name sounds. You if you go back in ancient times, you would carry the flag of your enemy and do some atrocity so that they would, you know, people would see that flag of their enemy, whoever you're trying to demonize, and they would associate that atrocity with your enemy. And that's really where the term comes from. And so what it is, it's doing an act and blaming it on your enemies or whoever you want to fight or demonize or go to war with. And one of a real good example of that actually is World War II, what Hitler did. I mean, and now the documents are out. You know, we read in history books, you know, gee whiz willikers, Hitler went and attacked Poland because, you know, Poland attacked them. Well, that's not actually what ended up happening. Hitler took some of his own people out of mental institutions, prisons, and actually used them and created a false flag and blamed it on Poland and shot his own people. Go ahead.
You can look at the way the United States after 9/11, they told you Osama bin Laden did it, and then they went after Saddam Hussein. Then they hung him on TV, and they used that as an excuse to steal all kinds of money from the American government to so-called rebuild Iraq. And the real question is, why do you ever tear it down after you admitted that you lied about weapons of mass destruction? That was like the false flag. You know, weapons of mass destruction, they're going to kill us, we need to go into this country. You know, that's kind of another look at it. You know, they took billions of dollars from the American people for that war. And it was false.
not to mention the $9 billion in gold bullion that just disappeared like a fart in the wind. Palletized gold bullion, $9 billion of it. Look it up for listeners that maybe are listening to this later on that find this hard to believe. But anyway, Teresa, yeah, there's been a lot of them. I mean, that was Hitler's on that. I mean, even if you go to the War of 1812 with what was his name? That Oliver Wendell Holmes. They blamed that on you know, they set mines, and that's come out now because they tried to say, well, you know, the Spanish laid the mines, blah, 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 the Cubans, I forget now which one it was, and it's come out since then, we laid our own mines. And that's what got us into that war. And then like Jackie brought up, I mean, this whole thing with 9/11 and Iraq. But there's just many of them. So I don't know if that answered that question. Did that help you to understand at least what a false flag is?
Yes, that was very good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of times, you know, governments actually want to go to war for reasons other than stated. Let's put it that way. You know, and that's why a lot of times when you hear some of these politicians talk, you'll hear them talk about, oh, blah blah blah. It's against the interests of the United States. Well, the military is not really here to protect the interests of the United States or any other government. They're here to defend liberty, to defend our freedoms, not to go making money and empire building. And on this, I'll throw this out as well. There's he's deceased, a General Smedley Butler. He was a general in the Marine Corps, and he wrote a book called War is a Racket. Now, they can poo-poo it all they want. This man was a 2-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner. And as you can tell from the name of his book, War is a Racket, he gets in there and how he was used for Standard Oil, which is Rockefeller, you know, to expand their interest in the sugar and all this. I mean, you'd have to get the book. You can get some quotes on there. You may be able to find the book itself online. It's probably out of print now. But so there's been a lot of these false flag operations. And to me, this one here in Colorado, it just has it written all over the place with this coming down with the small arms. And the reason I bring this up is because the American people as a whole have been asleep at the wheel for a long, long time. But I have to believe that having their firearms taken away from them is not something they're prepared to stand idly by. I mean, we've had record firearm sales here in the last several months. And when they do polls and are asked why, they say because the economy is collapsing and they don't trust the government. So I've got to believe that this one is not one that the American public's going to just stand idly by. And that's why I brought that up. So we're down to about 3 minutes. You two have any comments or questions or any part you wanted to add?
Not me. Thank you. This was very informative.
Yes, it is. Not me either.
Oh, you guys are killing me. I got 3 minutes to burn up here. So anyway, yeah, just and please do not take my word for any of these things. That's why I throw out the documents, the names of the documents. So if somebody has doubts, good. Please, by all means, go look these documents up. I can't cover all this in half an hour. I can just give, you know, this little synopsis, throw the documents out there for people to look at themselves and go from there. So that's about all I had. Got about 2 more minutes, so I suppose that I could go ahead and end this. Jackie, do you know if I end this episode, is that going to cut you two off? Because I actually wanted to talk to you for a minute.
Yeah, it will.
Oh, it'll cut us off? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was just wondering if you'd heard any news from Vernon. I tried to send him an IM on Skype, and he didn't answer back, so now who's told?
He sent me a number to the show because I needed the number, so he did talk to me earlier.
Oh, okay. So things went okay as far as you know?
Oh, no, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Let's see who this is. Who just popped in on Skype here? Looks like we've got a Skype caller.
Yeah, I'm calling late, but you can extend the show, or in other words, you can go into archives. There's one thing I'm not familiar with the 1917 and 1933 acts that you say made the American people enemies of the state. So in case you have to go right now, can you encapsulate what you probably said throughout the show? I wasn't here until now.
Well, we've got about 30 seconds, and I'll try to spit this out real quick before it is.
You have
but
15
these shows
minutes that are overtime, Larry.
Say what?
You'll have 15 minutes of overtime.
You have more than that. You've got at least a half an hour.
With the free one?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
you're on the free? Yeah, you have about...
You have 15 minutes.
You know.
Okay, well, she's squawking at me. There's 10 seconds. But
But
anyway,
that's okay.
yes. If you
Don't
look
worry about that.
Okay. If you look up those acts, the Trading with the Enemies Act of 1917, and okay, I see it says recording left, so I guess it quit recording. Whatever. Anyway, the Trading with the Enemies Act of 1917, and then I'll get the exact title of it here. War and Emergency Powers Act of 1933. If you look at those two, you'll see that there was a major change where the original one in 1917 specified people outside the United States. But when you go to the 1933 Emergency Powers Act, it says people within the United States.
Uh-huh.
And that effectively made all the American people, enemies of the state that are dealing with gold. There's other things that tie into that as well, but those are the two main acts.
Okay, those are the two acts that you've mentioned. How, briefly, do these acts make the American people enemies of the state? I know the NDAA makes the American peoples enemies of the state because Obama can just, at will, incarcerate or kill anybody. At least that's the theory. So how do these acts do the same thing or a similar thing?
Well, these actually are some of the founding acts that started to allow that by making, and again, if you get a chance, you might want to go back and listen to the previous shows that I got into, because I actually started with the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, and got into there's another one, if you want to look this up, it's called Down v. Bidwell, 1901. That's Supreme Court case, and Justice John Marshall Harlan, he actually stated in there that there are two governments functioning within the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets into a whole legal thing, and I don't know where you are with all this. That's what's kind of hard.
I'm a libertarian. I do research every day, and I haven't come across these acts, so that's why I called in just before you called. But again, if you could make into one statement, two statements, or three statements exactly how the American people are made enemies of the state.
Okay, well, go look at those two acts, and it'll tell you right in there, because they changed it in the War Powers Act. They said, or any person within the United States. Now, in particular, this is talking about dealing with gold, because that's what happened in the First World War.
Yeah, when FDR confiscated gold. All right, how, again, does dealing with gold, how does it make an American citizen an outlaw or an enemy of the state, specifically?
Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you. In 1917, doing that was people without the United States. When Roosevelt made this War Powers Act in 1933, he changed the verbiage of that Trading with the Enemies Act to include persons inside the United States.
Okay, so people inside the United States as opposed to people outside the United States. What is it that people have to do for them to be considered an enemy?
Using gold, because if you'll also recall, he also made people turn in their gold.
Right, I remember that. The confiscation, the investigation into safety deposit boxes. Right, those people at that time, if they didn't do it, they were considered outlaws. They could be fined or jailed. Is that what you're talking about, or is it something else?
Yes, and then right after they did that and said it was going to be for a brief period of time, they put out an edict that even asking for your gold back was illegal. And that's how that happened, and then that's how we ended up getting off to where we had all this fiat currency that wasn't backed by anything. They all tie in. It's like a chain of events.
Okay, so I can understand if somebody wanted the gold back and the government said no, therefore if they continued to ask, they would be considered a nuisance, they would be probably breaking the law. Now what about those people who aren't asking for the gold back? Because it seems, are you saying the American people at large or the American people in dealing with their gold possessions at that time?
Well, in particular, it's with the gold. But again, you'll have to get into these, and I had mentioned just before you got on that there's another one you might want to look up called HJR 192 that came out at the same time, because what happened at that point is we do not actually pay off debts anymore. We discharge debts. And it's HJR 192. You can find that online, and that differentiates. It talks about the remedy is what it is. Since we can no longer pay off our debts, we actually discharge them.
All right,
So basically, they made a currency, and they made it strong by forcing it on people with jail time.
am I being asked a question?
No, I'm asking Lori.
Uh-huh.
Oh. Well, yes, they actually threatened people with I don't remember exactly what the penalties were, but yes, you could be fined and or jailed for asking for your gold back.
Okay, that we covered. Now, outside of that, you mentioned this particular law, and again, I'm not getting any specifics. How does the law today apply to the people making the American people enemies of the state?
Well, because all of these are carried forward, that War Powers Act is actually renewed. And if you listen to the legislation, a lot of times they make reference back to the War Powers Act. And if you go back to the War Powers Act, that has reference back to Trading with the Enemies Act. This is one of the things that a lot of people miss with law is they don't realize they're all daisy-chained together.
All right,
the
daisy-chain. But what are they, what you're doing is this, you're making references back to further references. Again, that by itself doesn't explain why people are the enemies of the state. That's what I'm trying to get to. I can understand that if you're going to say there's some sort of connection between the first act, the War Powers Act, the NDAA perhaps, and subsequent acts, still those are acts that have been passed. Without I know about the NDAA, I know a little bit about the War Powers Act, I don't know about this trade thing. How then am I considered by the government somebody who is an outlaw or an enemy of the state?
Well,
what do you use to trade with?
I use money or my credit card.
If you didn't want to use money, then you can be an enemy. If you didn't want to use their money, or you stood up and said, I want my gold, then you're an enemy. Nobody thinks like that today.
Well, first of all, nobody today is going to ask for gold because the gold in Fort Knox. Nobody knows if it's there. And secondly, nobody cares because it's supposed to be the government's gold. It's not the people's gold. So they can't ask for that kind of gold.
But it was forced on you.
Huh?
To let go of the gold was forced on you.
The what? The gold?
Yeah, to let go of the gold.
Oh, to let go of the gold. Yeah, but that was their personal gold. Right. But I wasn't around at that time, so I had no gold to ask for. So how, if I don't have any gold to ask for from the government, am I still an enemy of the state according to this dissertation, or is it something else?
Well, you still are, and see, you came in where I'm trying to give the background and bring it forward to where you're at with the NDAA, and then you have what are those other ones, the Emergency Establishment Act and all this kind of thing, but it all ties back to this, and that's what I'm doing. I just now got up to 1933, basically.
Okay, so in 33, the people were enemies of the state. You didn't talk about how the people are enemies of the state today, then?
Well, no, I've not gotten there.
Oh, you haven't gotten there.
In.
Okay.
No, and this, yeah, I've just been bringing it up to how there's two governments in this country because of the Civil War and that type of thing, and how that ended up making for two different governments. And then bringing that into what's happening here with the 1917 and then the 1933, and then bringing it forward from there. And that's where you came in now.
Okay, so who's in control of the second government?
Well, are you familiar with the de facto and the de jure government at all? I mean, are those familiar terms to you?
Yeah, I've heard of them, but I don't know, probably to the extent that you do, what they mean.
Okay. Well, I can give you a rough little history here. It might be easier to go back and listen to the last two shows.
It wouldn't be easier. Okay, if you know what it is, then I'm sure it can be stated in one sentence. I just asked who's in charge of this second government. If we have two governments, there's a covert president, overt president. Is there a covert president?
Okay, well, so which one are you calling the first, and which one are you calling the second?
Overt means overt, covert means covert. Overt president, of course, is Obama. The covert president would refer to the second government, wouldn't it?
Okay, well, no, because actually the one that you think of as the government, what you're calling the...
Who is in charge of the
overt,
second government?
Well, you're asking for an awful lot
All right,
of history
forget it.
here.
Look.
Okay.
Forget
All
it.
right, fine.
Hello?
Yeah, I just cut him off. He apparently wants to sit here and argue and bitch and complain when you know, and come in and wants me to give him, 3 weeks worth of history in 15 minutes or something in overtime. So anyway, yeah. Well, that's my first one of those. So how'd I handle it? I mean, he was kind of. I mean, he wasn't outright belligerent, but he was kind of. I don't know. What do you think?
Then he started to get a little angry.
Teresa?
I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm here. I was trying to understand what exactly he was asking for, and he was wanting, like me, he just wanted a real kind of direct, not yes or no, but a very brief answer. And I'm not 100% of the question, but what I was thinking is maybe he's trying to find out how does that directly relate to me today, all this that happened and everything. How is it affecting me today?
Right. Well, and
If
I
they
agree
made a
with
law, if they made a law that people abide by, and they don't even know why, that's how it can affect you today. If people knew about these laws and the things that go on behind closed doors with the government, they wouldn't be so easy to believe the things that the government does.
Yeah,
That's
and I
how it
think that
affects
might
you
have
today.
been a type of answer that might have helped the situation, because I got the idea he had a real specific question, and but he was getting a whole bunch of information, but not like a specific answer to that question. So that's what I was thinking. He was thinking.
What's the point in knowing about gold in Fort Knox if most of the people don't even know what their money is backed by?
Right.
So what's the point in knowing about gold in Fort Knox? People today don't know this. They listen to Sean Hannity and all of these other people telling them, oh, go buy silver, go buy gold. But they don't understand why and what for. If it was no big deal, they wouldn't have been trying to get other governments to accept this dollar like they did back in, what's this guy named John Perkins talks about this. Like when they first started going after other governments and making them use this dollar. I mean, to me, that all ties together.
economic
So first
hitman,
something
yeah.
backed by nothing.
And Teresa, one of the problems, you're right, he obviously was looking for something, but I wasn't fully understanding his question either. But the bottom line is, this is why I started out where I did. This is a whole history thing that, like Jackie was talking about, that people have to understand to get to where we're at. And he doesn't want to he wants to come here and he wants to blah, 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 and ask me a direct question. Well, I don't have all these things right at the tip of my tongue. This is why I look these things up so that I can throw these documents out. And I mean, he wants me to sum up in 15 minutes what's weeks of studying, and he can't even take the time to go back and listen to a couple of half-hour shows. Because if he doesn't understand that, he's not going to understand the rest of it.
Well, I think that's the end.